wanna heal your sorrow. Just talk to me. We'll make a new tomorrow. Just talk to me. What makes this happy face? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight, better off. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight, won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Just talk to me. We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy face? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight, better off. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight, won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Just talk to me. We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy face?
Okay, sorry for the late start. Where are my captions? There we go. Are we up in the... Oh, damn it. They're all messed up again. Everything got totally screwed up today. Because I was a dumbass and I ran my, one of my cleanup programs and it wiped out all kinds of stuff. Okay. I didn't think about the settings. I knew I needed to change them. But anyway, we're good. So, where are we? We're playing Forbidden Religion. Oh yes. Article 9 and 10 tonight. So we're a couple articles into the second section of the book. So this one, we get to revisit some of the Knights Templar stuff that we already covered in the Temple and the Lodge. From a different author, though. So This one is by David Hatcher Childress, um, and it is The Lost Templar Fleet and the Jolly Roger. Did the Pirates of the Caribbean have a covert vendetta? Okay, this should be interesting. In 1307, King Philip the Fourth of France traveled to Rome to convince Pope Clement V that the Knights Templar were not holy defenders of the Catholic faith, but were instead seeking to destroy it. He succeeded. On October 13th, King Philip ordered simultaneous raids on all the Templar priories in his country. Sorry. Within weeks, hundreds of knights were captured, including their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. The official day of the suppression of the Templars was a Friday, the origin of popular belief that Friday the 13th is unlucky. I've heard there are other origins, but this is one origin I have heard about before. Templars throughout Europe were arrested and harassed in an effort to extract confessions of heresy. All those captured were tortured, sometimes for months and years, to make them divulge the secret of the Holy Grail and its whereabouts. Jacques de Molay was given special attention and suffered years of agony, but it is said none of the Templars revealed the desired information. In 1312, even though the Templars had effectively been crushed in France, Philip pressured Pope Clement V into disbanding the order throughout Europe. A papal bull suppressing the order everywhere was issued. Not all of that agrees with what we read in the Temple and the Lodge. I don't remember any of them saying they were tortured for years, but there was torture, for sure. At this time, the king's men entering Templar castles found that many of them were abandoned. The few men discovered were arrested, tried, and found guilty of sins against God. In 1314, de Molay, who had suffered in Philip's dungeons for 7 years, blinded by red-hot irons, his genitals boiled in oil and pulled off with cords, and most of his bones broken or dislocated on the rack, faced, by order of king and pope, his last torment, roasting alive over a slow fire. This barbarous destruction of a human life was never to be forgotten, and today, 700 years later, de Molay's name lives on as the title of a Masonic youth group. The Knights Templar now hunted men dispersed all over Europe, yet these refugee knights still commanded immense respect from Europe's fighting men. In many places they were welcomed and given sanctuary as heroes. Some joined the Teutonic Knights and fought against Mongol and Tartar incursions in Eastern Europe. Some went to Hungary and fought against Turkish expansion. Some went to Scotland, others to Portugal. The Lost Templar Fleet. The mysterious Knights Templar had an extensive sea network and may even have inherited some of the maps and other secrets of the Phoenicians. Their great fleet is discussed in Michael Bejant and Richard Lay's book, The Temple and the Lodge. The authors point out that the Templars had a huge fleet at their disposal, a fleet operating out of ports in Mediterranean France and Italy, as well as northern France, Flanders, and Portugal. When King Philip ordered the raids on October 13, 1307, the Templar fleet based at La Rochelle somehow got advance warning. The entire fleet set sail, escaped Philip's net, and has never been heard from since. The disappearance of the Templar fleet has become one of the great mysteries of history. What happened to it? Was it scattered on the seven seas, or did it secretly regroup? Bejant and Lay claimed that the fleet escaped en masse and sailed for a mysterious destination offering political asylum and safety, Scotland. To get there, the Mediterranean fleet had to sail through the dangerous Straits of Gibraltar, and it probably stopped at various friendly Portuguese ports such as Almoral Castle, uh, Portugal was one of the few places where the Knights could find asylum, a country that, unlike Spain, was largely sympathetic to their cause. In Portugal, the Knights Templar retained something of a cohesive organization, merely changing their name to the Order of the Knights of Christ. Here they found royal support to which the Church could only turn a blind eye. First, King Alfonso IV became the Grand Master of the new Knights of Christ and began to send Portuguese ships into the Atlantic. Later, his son Prince Henry the Navigator also became a Grand Master of the Templars and continued his father's tradition of Atlantic exploration. The curious history of Portugal and later Brazil is tied to the Templars and their lost fleet. Even the name Portugal is curious. It has been suggested that it is a Templar name, Port au Graal, meaning Port of the Grail. Portugal has always had close ties with England, and one wonders if this does not have something to do with the Templars and their fleet in Portugal. And how was small Portugal to remain independent on the Iberian Peninsula? Was it because of this strong connection to the Templars and ancient seafarers? Later, Portugal's transatlantic colony, Brazil, was set up in much the same way as the United States, as a union of independent states, and, significantly, it was set up by a series of Masonic lodges, just as in North America. The Templars' last stand. Bejant and Lay go on to say that the Templar fleet sailed from Portugal and up the west coast of Ireland to safe ports in Donegal and Ulster, where Templar properties were located and arms smuggling to Argyll was common. The fleet reached Argyll by sailing to the south of the islands of Islay and Jura, into the Sound of Jura, uh, unloading men and cargo at the Scottish Templar strongholds of Kilmary, Castlesweet, and Kilmartin. Robert the Bruce controlled portions of Scotland, but not all of it. Significant portions of the northern and southern Highlands were controlled by clans allied with England. Robert had been excommunicated by the Pope in 1306, 1 year before the Templar persecution began. Essentially, the papal decree that outlawed the Templars was not applicable in Scotland, or at least in the parts of Scotland that were controlled by Robert the Bruce. The turning of the tide for Robert the Bruce, Scotland, and perhaps the Knights Templar was the famous Battle of Bannockburn. Although the actual site of the battle remains undetermined, it is known to have taken place within 2.5 miles of Stirling Castle, just south of Edinburgh. On June 24, 1314, Robert the Bruce, together with 6,000 Scots, miraculously defeated 20,000 English soldiers. Exactly what took place that day has never been fully recorded. It is believed by some that the battle was won with help from a special force of Knights Templar. Pirates, guardians of the Sangreal. Um, But what became of the missing Templar fleet? Was it grounded in Scotland? Did it sail across the Atlantic 100 years before Columbus? Did it become one of the great fleets of the Portuguese and Scottish kings? Did it become a fleet of pirates that attacked ships loyal to the Pope and the Vatican? Perhaps all of the above. According to Michael Bradley, author of Holy Grail Across the Atlantic, the Templars were guardians of the Holy Grail, in the sense that it comprised the sangreal, or holy blood. The story goes that descendants of Jesus living in southern France were evacuated from Montségur during a terrible siege in March of 1244. They probably hid, as some troubadour poetry suggests, in numerous secret Pyrenees caverns for months or even years. Yeah. But for the long-term safety of the Templars and the Holy Blood, the Order and the Grail had to be taken out of France and ultimately out of Europe. Bradley says the Garonne River was the obvious route of eventual escape, as it extends from deep in the Pyrenees across southern France to the Garonne estuary on the west coast. La Rochelle, home of the Templar fleet, is situated on the estuary. A sanctuary at the town and fortress of Angoulême along the way may have been used as a haven for 2 or 3 generations. As long as the Templars remained a cohesive and independent order, there was hope that the lineage could secretly hide in Europe and begin recouping its fortunes. Bradley believes at least some Templar vessels that disappeared in 1307 carried the Holy Grail. This may have included not only individual members of the former Merovingian royal family, but also a large assortment of physical treasure, including a fortune in gold coins, crosses, jewelry, and possibly even the famous cup of the Last Supper, Grail chalice, or incredibly, the Ark of the Covenant. Both the cup and the Ark were rumored to be in the possession of the Templars, though most historians consider this, like most of the Holy Grail material, to be mere fantasy. Bradley agrees that Bajant and Lay that the Templar fleet sailed north through the Irish Sea to their final destination, the western fjords of Scotland, carefully avoiding the Irish coast because of pro-Vatican control of the ports. The fleet landed in various areas north of present-day Glasgow in the environs of Oban, where here Templar graves were marked with the familiar Templar symbol of skull and crossbones. In Scotland, the Templars apparently chose not to organize themselves into a new order of knighthood, but elected instead to spread their secret doctrine more widely by creating Freemasonry under the leadership of the powerful St. Clairs, or Sinclairs, of Roslin. At this point, the naval war with the Vatican began in earnest. Says Bradley, quote, "An upsurge in European piracy begins from this time, and the pattern of it suggests that many pirates were not mere freebooters who would attack anyone, but very curious pirates who confined their attentions to Vatican and loyal Catholic shipping." End quote. The Templar fleet was to be split into 2 parts. One would anchor in the Orkneys and prepare for Sinclair's ambitious journeys to North America. The other was to sail the Atlantic and Mediterranean as a naval force attacking ships associated with the Vatican and their allies. Some of the Templar fleet would go on to be absorbed into the Portuguese navy and fly the Portuguese flag, while other ships, usually commanded by French or English captains, flew a black flag with a skull and crossbones, a symbol that would become known worldwide as the Jolly Roger. The Kingdom of the Jolly Roger. The skull and crossbones symbol on the flags of early pirates originated because the Templars and their fleet could not safely fly their true flag, a red cross on a white background. This was the mystique of the early pirates. They were essentially a secret navy that was not supposed to exist. This navy even traveled to the New World nearly a century before the Spanish. Authors such as Bajant, Lincoln, and Bradley maintain that the skull and crossbones imagery that the Templars employed is nothing but the old Templar cross pattee rendered in human skeletal material, with the knobs of the leg bones being the pattees of the Templar cross. The message of the skull and crossbones is abundantly clear, says Bradley. It was a Neo-Templar vow to oppose the Roman Church to the death, and thus the symbolism of human bones on both the flag and Templar gravestones. The term Jolly Roger itself was an homage to Roger II of Sicily, 1095 to 1154. Roger had reputedly been associated with the Templars during the Crusades and conquered Apulia and Salerno in A.D. 1127, despite opposition from Pope Innocent II. He was crowned King of Sicily by anti-Pope Anacletus II in A.D. 1130. The anti-Pope? That's a new one on me. I haven't heard about that before. Innocent eventually yielded and invested Roger with the lands he already possessed. Roger established a strong central administration, largely free of Rome, and his brilliant court at Palermo was a center of arts, letters, and sciences. His court was full of dancers, music, and entertainers, and he was known as Jolly Roger. In many ways, the Renaissance began at Roger's court. His fight with the Pope was well known, especially to seafarers and traders. Roger also established a navigational school on Sicily, one isolated from the Vatican by both the sea and his fleet, which invited Jewish and Islamic geographers as consultants. The Arabic geographer Ibn Idrisi was attracted to Roger's court and produced a celestial disk and a terrestrial disk, both in silver, which represented respectively all the astronomical and geographical knowledge of the day. Idris and Roger also produced the important navigational treatise called Al-Rojari. Roger was fond of Islamic and ancient Hebrew love poetry, with a taste for beautiful women to match the allusions in it. Roger, through the Arab geographers in his court, also began to obtain important maps that the Muslims had acquired from libraries such as the one at Alexandria in Egypt. The rise of piracy on the open seas. When the Spanish Inquisition was established in the New World after 1492, the Templar pirates, quote unquote pirates, spread their attacks to the Caribbean. Later, British seamen such as Francis Drake in the 16th century would elevate piracy to big business. Once the Inquisition had been installed in Spain, Drake preyed only upon Spanish Catholic ships. Eventually, the pirates would journey on to Pacific ports in Peru and Mexico, all in the name of an ongoing naval war that had had its genesis many years earlier with the Knights Templar. And that's the end of that article. I wanted to go back here. There's two things. The Holy Grail across the Atlantic. I don't know if I have that. I've gotten so many books that I've been able to download and that I've forgotten everything I've downloaded. So I'm going to write it down real quick because I would be interested in possibly adding it to the list. Where is a stinking pen? Okay, fine. I won't write it. I'll type it. Holy Grail across the Atlantic. Bear with me. And who was it by? It is Michael Bradley. Okay. And the anti-pope. I don't know. I think I've heard the term before, but I don't know anything at all about it. So I'm going to look that up. All right. Moving on. The next one is going to be about the Templars too, I believe, because it's the mystery of the Battle of Bannockburn. Is it revealed in the ancient maxim "as above, so below" by Jeff Nisbet. So let me settle back in here and we will jump into it. Perhaps no battle in history has been written about more passionately and at greater length than the 1314 Battle of Bannockburn. Without that great battle, Scotland may never have managed to shake off the yoke of English domination, may therefore never have established a true national identity, and so may never have birthed the stirring declaration of Arbroath, which was, in the opinion of many, the model for America's own Declaration of Independence. No fewer than 7 accounts were written within 63 years of the battle, and countless others since. 2 were published in the last year alone. Why all the talk? Because at the heart of that battle because at the heart of that battle has always lain a great mystery: how the enormously outnumbered Scots would have could have won the day against a force described as the greatest army that a king of England had ever commanded. To solve that mystery, researchers have studied the site's topography, the political climate, each side's leadership, even the height of the tides, to explain how the underdog could have prevailed against such overwhelming odds. Yet still, the mystery remains. Introduce a possible 11th hour intervention of the shadowy Knights Templar into the mix, and the mystery only deepens. But was Scotland really the underdog, or was it only meant to appear so? Working under the credo that what looks too good to be true usually isn't, I looked someplace new, at the sky above the battlefield, and saw what had perhaps been hidden there, in broad daylight, almost 700 years ago. Let's go back. It's 1286. With the death of Alexander III, Scotland is suddenly without a king. Alexander's infant granddaughter, Margaret, the daughter of King Eric II of Norway, is the only heir to the throne, and the Scots quickly swear fealty to her. It doesn't take long for Alexander's brother-in-law, England's crafty King Edward I, to arrange Margaret's betrothal to his own son, but his plan fails when the little queen dies en route. The Scottish throne stands vacant. Two powerful Scottish nobles, each related by blood to Alexander, vie for the prize. One is Lord John Balliol of Galway, and the other Lord Robert Bruce of Annandale, grandfather of the man who eventually wins victory at Bannockburn. Civil war seems inevitable. Whom to choose? Incredibly, Scotland asks the King of England to choose. Edward, true to form, picks the weaker of the two, John Balliol, and is himself declared superior lord of both realms in the bargain. With Balliol under his thumb, Edward garrisons Scotland's castles with his own men. Although not the crowned king of Scotland, Edward is the next best thing. Of Scotland, sorry, but a hero soon steps forward who captures the hearts and minds of the downtrodden. That hero is William Wallace, whose exploits, romanticized in Hollywood's Braveheart, are now widely known. Edward eventually has Wallace castrated, drawn, and quartered, sending the pieces of Wallace's body north as a gentle warning against future mischief. Enter Annandale's grandson, Robert the Bruce, who systematically recaptures Scottish strongholds, the exception being Stirling Castle near Bannockburn. The Scots lay siege. Edward's son, by then King Edward II, is given an ultimatum: arrive with an army by Midsummer Day, 24 June 1314, or Sir Philip de Mowbray will surrender the fortress. Edward accepts the challenge and arrives one day early, with a mighty beast of an army that outnumbers Robert's by at least 3-1. The Scots' situation seems hopeless. Let's now look up. At dawn, Taurus the bull stands on the horizon, facing north in a sky already too bright to see him. The uppermost stars of Orion the hunter have just risen. Venus, a planet long associated with the pre-Christian goddess, shines just north of Orion's weapon, in a direct line with the bull's lower horn. The sun rises in Gemini, the heavenly twins, followed by Jupiter, Mercury, and the moon. Bringing up the rear is Leo the lion, with the war planet Mars below its breast. Accompanying Orion are his two hunting companions, Canis Major and Canis Minor, the big dog and the little dog. Throughout the day, this celestial group moves westward. Taurus reaches his zenith at midday and begins to descend. As evening falls, Orion drives Taurus below the horizon. The sun sets and night returns. Short as a midsummer night is at that latitude, for those who must fight at dawn it must seem all too long. Many will never see another. Let's now consider events at Bannockburn over that same period, keeping in mind the Hermetic dictum, as above, so below. The parallels are striking. First, an event at midday that becomes the single most memorable of the entire 2-day engagement, First Blood. Due to a leadership dispute, Edward's army is split into two great horns as it thunders near. Earl Gilbert de Clare of Gloucester commands one horn. Earl Humphrey de Bohun of Hereford commands the other. Some 50 yards ahead of Hereford's columns rides his nephew, Henry de Bohun, clad in full armor on a powerful warhorse with his spear in his hand. Henry spots the King of Scots, armed only with a battle-axe and shield, sitting on a small grey horse, inspecting some of his troops at the forest's edge. De Bohun sees the chance to single-handedly win the battle before it begins and takes the shot. Before I go on, there are two pictures here I'm going to show real quick. One is England's King Edward II, son of Edward Longshanks, who fought Robert the Bruce at Battle of Bannockburn, Scotland. So it's just a little tiny picture, but it's of Edward II. That's what he was supposed to have looked like. And then the other one is the sky at dawn above Bannockburn, Scotland, as it appeared at the time of the famous 14th century battle between the British and the outnumbered Scots. So if you're into astronomy, you may, or astrology, probably more astrology, you'll recognize some of that, maybe. Um, I can't pick out a whole lot from that personally because I don't know the constellations very well. That's something I've just never taken the time to study in depth. All right, moving on. He couches his lance and charge full tilt toward Robert, but Robert is ready. A split second before Henry's lance can pierce him through, Robert sidesteps his horse and, standing in his stirrups, delivers Henry a mighty blow that cuts through helmet, skull, and brain. It is a tidy tale, stirring enough to survive down through time, as was perhaps intended. Etymological research reveals that de Bohun relates to both Taurus and the word boon, uh, boon, the name given to cakes traditionally offered to the goddess in pre-Christian times. Interestingly enough, bannocks, as in Bannockburn, are Scottish cakes that were similarly used. In John Barbour's 14th century biography of King Robert, Barbour specifically refers to de Bohun and Robert as the Boon and the Bruss. I suggest that Bruss may derive from the Middle English word for brussen, meaning to crush or mangle. Is it possible that John Barbour intended de Bohun's single combat with Robert to symbolize the simultaneous struggle between Taurus and Orion in the sky above? Was he secretly pointing up? First, let's consider two so-called myths about Scotland that refuse to die. The Egyptian connection. The 15th century Scotichronicon claims that the Scots derived their name from Scota, daughter of the Pharaoh who pursued the children of Israel out of Egypt. Scota and her followers left Egypt shortly thereafter, and after many years, her people eventually settled in a land they called Scotia. Recently, the claim is made in Keith Laidler's The Head of God that Scota's father was Akhenaten, the pharaoh who tried to establish monotheism in Egypt, using the sun to represent the one true God who should otherwise have no image. Most astonishingly, Lawrence Gardner, author of the Bloodline of the Holy Grail, recently claimed that Akhenaten was in fact Moses, the man who led the Israelites out of Egypt. The Jesus Connection. In 1982's Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Michael Bejant, Richard Lay, and Henry Lincoln, the authors argue that Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, contrary to Christian dogma, were married and had children, founding a holy bloodline that continued to thrive through some of the highest and mightiest families of Europe. Evidence of that bloodline have been uncovered by the Knights Templar while excavating beneath the ruins of King Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem in the early 12th century. Upon the order's barbaric 1307 dissolution, it's thought that many of its members escaped from France to Scotland just in time to help Robert the Bruce, a man whose parentage may have united both bloodlines, the Egyptian and the Holy, in his struggle with England. Dangerous ideas indeed, especially in 1314. But if believed by some, could these ideas have been secretly introduced into the grand tapestry of history as it was woven at Bannockburn, to perhaps one day in more tolerant times be trotted out as truth? Let's now consider how those two myths may be connected to another common root, the belief system of ancient Egypt. In his most recent book, Rex Deus, Tom Wallace Murphy reports a claim that Jesus was an initiate of the Egyptian cult of Osiris and a follower of the goddess Isis, which is largely confirmed by the well-documented Templar veneration of Isis under the Christianized guise of the Black Madonna. The belt stars of Orion are central to Graham Hancock and Robert Bovell's theories about an extraordinarily early ground plan of the pyramids on Egypt's Giza Plateau. As I continued to study the accepted reasons given for the Scottish victory at Bannockburn, they seemed less and less credible. Moreover, the existence of an underground brotherhood of Scots and English, united in a cause that transcended national loyalty, seemed likely, and confirmation that a secret tale, written deep between the lines of the official tale, began to emerge out of the mists of time. Some further points of interest. In a part of Barber's book dealing with Robert the Bruce's early days, Barber tells of Robert being pursued by Lord John of Lorne, who used a pair of Robert's own hunting dogs. Robert the Bruce shakes the scent by wading up a stream, just as Orion and his canine companions descend nightly beneath the western ocean, only to rise again with the sun. Barber also pauses in his tale to deliver a strange discourse on prophecy and the conjunction of planets, perhaps to suggest that he was actually telling two tales, one tale above and one below. A.M. Duncan, Barber's most recent translator, has speculated that Barber's 14th century patron was Bishop William Sinclair of Dunkeld, younger brother to the Lord of Roslin, an ancestor of the man who built the 15th century Roslin Chapel, long considered an architectural repository of ancient knowledge and Templar lore. The actual Battle of Bannockburn. As the English army thunders northward, Robert's army waits in the Torwood, a forest south of Stirling Castle. Nowadays defined as a hill or heap, there's an interesting alternative definition of the word tor in the 1899 R. H. Allen book Star Names, Their Lore and Meaning, referring to the ancient Druids' reverence for the constellation Taurus. Allen says some have claimed, perhaps fancifully, that the Tors, T-O-R-S, of England were the old sites of the Druids' Taurine cult. As our cross buns are the current representation of early bull cakes, with the same stellar association that trace a connection back through the ages to Egypt and Phoenicia. Perhaps the claim was not so fanciful. Sorry for the hesitation on buns. I thought maybe it was a typo or something, but it is cross buns. Hereford's argument with Gloucester about who should lead the advance slows the English such that they must rush to Bannockburn, arriving exhausted, yet oh so conveniently in the nick of time for Robert's midday combat with de Bohun. An English deserter named Alexander Seton, a recurring Templar surname, appears in Robert's camp on the eve of battle. He tells Robert that de Bohun's defeat has demoralized the English, and that if the Scots fight on the following morning they will surely win. As the dim light of dawn is seen, Seton utters the words, "Now's the time and now's the hour," a phrase immortalized in Scots poet Robert Burns's stirring ode to Bannockburn. In the pre-dawn darkness of June 24th, the Scots quietly approach the English army and succeed in drawing a battle line closer than English prudence should have allowed. As both sides face off, the Scots suddenly kneel in prayer. King Edward thinks they are kneeling to him for mercy, while behind him Venus has already risen, followed by Orion and the sun. Could the widely reported event have been orchestrated to serve a double purpose: one prayer for the moment, one hidden for posterity. Robert's greatest military innovation was his unique use of schiltrons, dense hedgehogs of men wielding 12-foot spears pointed outward. Schiltrons had been successfully used before, but only as a stationary defense. Robert trained his to move and allowed offensive use of this tactic. As Orion's three belt stars moved inexorably toward Taurus, three Scottish schiltrons advanced on the English. Among the battle flags held aloft was that of Robert's trusted lieutenant, James Douglas. It depicted three stars on a sky blue background. The English army is positioned in a wedge of land between two tributaries of the river Forth, a tidal river. As the Scots advance into that wedge, these tributaries deepen with a tide that is exceptionally high due to the sun and moon being in such close proximity, giving the English little time to fight except at the front line. Little room to fight, except at the front line. Legend then has it that a fresh force of 300 Knights Templar, led by Lord Sinclair of Roslin and followed by an exultant horde of camp followers, came screaming in from the west, throwing the enemy into an irreversible panic. Many drowned trying to flee the slaughter. Could that unusual proximity of sun and moon have been known long beforehand? Is that why Edward was given almost a year to assemble his mighty army? And if also known by the Earls Hereford and Gloucester, who had perhaps purposely delayed the English advance, is that why their tired forces bivouacked where they did? The 1314 Battle of Bannockburn did not end Scotland's War of Independence, but it did turn the tide. In 1322, Edward had his last foray north and found the land stripped of sustenance. King Robert's Testament, as Robert's scorch earth policy became known, left behind only a single meal in all the fields in southern Scotland: one lame cow. It's highly unlikely that mainstream historians will accept as fact any of these connections, but since I have neither academic turf nor reputation to protect, I make them anyway, and welcome debate. But I would caution that further comparison of the written records with the stubbornly persistent myths will reveal other connections, too numerous to either list here or shrug off as mere coincidence. There was more going on at the Battle of Bannockburn, both above and below, than history has allowed, and that's just the what of it. The why is another tale. The idea that myth has been persistently used as a vehicle to carry ultimately, though fundamental, truths forward into a more enlightened future is difficult for many of us to process, and yet it's important we try, especially on matters of religion, and especially in these terrible times. If it is possible that all teachings are equally wrong, and grew askew from just a single and sadly forgotten spiritual source, more ancient than we've been taught, then perhaps now's the time and now's the hour to consider that possibility. Okay, that last um, paragraph was kind of tough to get through. Um, but that is the end of that article. That takes us to Article 11, which is The Pyramids of Scotland, another one by Jeff Nisbet. Um, and then The Enigma of the Great Lost Sailors Map, another one by David Hatcher Childress. Looks like we're getting into the Piri Reis map in that one. And that ends section 2 of the book. So I've got a couple of things I need to write down out of that article too, for a little bit more research. The Scotichronicon is one I've never heard of, and it's mentioned again at the beginning of the next article. So I will definitely be looking that up. But yeah, that'll be it for this session. And that will be it for tonight. I am not gaming. I'm just gonna chill for the rest of the night. So I will see you all tomorrow night for the Star Wars short story and whatever else happens to come up. If I decide to game, I have to figure out a new game to play. So yeah, let's go see who's around for a raid. We've got Mr. Blitzer 79 playing The Witcher 3. Supeda plays is playing World of Warcraft, and Mikachu Datsu is playing Fortnite. How about The Witcher 3? We'll head on over there. I need to find some people that read to raid. But we'll head on over there. Bear with me just a minute. And why is everything so out of whack? I don't know. All right, here we go.